have been putting off feeling better, if you have been putting off caring for yourself, helping to manage your stress, any of the above, I want you to think about, what if you could have it now? What if you didn't have to wait? I hear this from women all the time. I will manage my stress when life slows down. I will prioritize. I will learn to meditate when the school year is over for my kids, when life slows down. And the problem is that never comes. There's always another season. There's always something else. And so what I find with so many women is that they are putting off their self-care, the prioritization of them feeling better, waiting for someday, and someday never comes. And so they are managing this chronic stress, chronic overwhelm, and it builds. It's like this giant snowball that just keeps accumulating all of the stressors throughout our lives. And the body is accumulating that stress. And so then it becomes more sensitive to stress, and it's more difficult to bring yourself into a calm state, into a peaceful state, and you're really starting to run on this chronic stress. I want you to think about, what if I could feel that way now? What if I didn't have to wait? Because here's the interesting thing. Science shows that in order to make change, your brains need to feel it first and act later. So stay with me for a second. So in order to become the version of yourself that you want to become, so maybe that is the version of yourself that is able to manage your stress. Maybe that's the calm presence. Maybe that's the mom that has more capacity. Maybe that's the woman that prioritizes self-care, that is prioritizing sleep, that is living life for herself, for her goals, for her own ambitions, that says no and means it, that has her own boundaries, whatever that is for you, right? Thinking about what you are hoping to become in your life. You can start feeling into that now. You do not have to wait. And by feeling into that now, your brain is actually going to start recognizing that, and then making choices and decisions that is going to bring you in that direction, so that you are becoming that version of yourself. And that is what becoming her is all about. That we are choosing through daily practice, through guided practice, that we are tuning into that version of ourselves now, so that we do not have to wait to feel better. Because life never slows down. It just doesn't. And so what's really interesting is that our brains don't know the difference between a really detailed visualization and a memory. And so when we are trying to create change in our lives, our brains are not going to believe us until we show them. Our brain does not respond necessarily to all of our thoughts. It responds to our actions, how we actually show up in life. And so when we say, I am going to get fit, yet every morning when the alarm goes off and we're supposed to go to the gym, we hit snooze and we say, okay, it'll be tomorrow. Even though we're telling ourselves that that's what we want, our actions are not aligning with it. And so it becomes harder and harder to follow through, because our brains and our subconscious minds, where most of our patterns and decisions and actions come from, it's not necessarily something that we even are conscious of. A lot of that is dictated by our subconscious mind. It doesn't believe us. And so it makes it even harder to create change. But when we have a daily practice of dropping in and embodying the version of ourselves that has the habits, the routines, the thoughts, the actions, the boundaries, the anything you name, when we drop into that and we get really clear on what that version of ourselves looks like, what they feel, what their habits, their routines are, our brains treat that as a memory. And so then when our subconscious mind goes to make predictions, actions, reactions, it is going to be pulling from that place. Our brains also have something called salience, and that is what the brain finds important, what to pay attention to. And so our brains naturally have a negativity bias. And so that's in order to keep us safe, right? When we are going through life, really not consciously, just kind of like floating through life, our brain is constantly looking for reasons why not to do things, why not to create change, right? Because it's trying to protect us. And so that's what the negativity bias is doing. And so when you are saying that you want to create this change, our brain is going to be actively looking for reasons why not to do that. It doesn't like change. But when we are implanting these visions of what we want to achieve, our brain is going to then start noticing the things that can bring us closer to that. And it's kind of like this door that opens up to possibility, this door that opens up to allowing the room for miracles, for synchronicities, for the noticing of the things that maybe would have, the opportunities that maybe were there before, but you wouldn't have maybe necessarily noticed. So that's a really key thing here. And part of becoming her, the reason I created this is that when I was at my lowest, I had spent years wanting to create change in my life, but never getting there. There was a gap between what I wanted and how I was showing up every day. And that's what I see with so many women I work with like pretty much every client that comes to me. It is not that they don't know what they want. Sometimes they don't necessarily have a clear vision, but they do have a sense of how they want to feel. But closing that gap is the disconnect, figuring out how to get from where you are now to where you want to be. And that's why this work is so powerful and something I do with every single client. And when I was in this place of feeling so low, I joined a group and I started doing this future self work. And I had no visions for what I wanted to create in my life. I just knew I wanted to feel better. And there were all these women in my group that really had these big dreams, creating companies or big jobs, relationships. And I, at the time, was a stay-at-home mom. And I felt blank when I was trying to envision the version of myself I was becoming. But slowly what I started to do is drop into the feeling. And it was feeling of more presence in my home and with my family, in my life, more patience with my kids, less anxiety. But slowly what I started to realize is that it was also about purpose. I had what I had once thought was the dream life. I was a stay-at-home mom. I had 3 kids, and I had a wonderful marriage, still have a wonderful marriage. I had my dream house. It was everything on paper that I thought was going to fill me up. But instead, what I noticed is that instead of feeling fulfilled, I woke up one day and realized I was completely empty. Not completely empty in that I didn't have the love and there were so many things to be grateful for. But what I thought was going to make me happy, all these external things, these achievements, what a lot of what we see manifestation work surrounded about is the material things, the things outside of ourselves that are supposed to make us feel a certain way. And what I realized is that once I got these things, and this is a tale and a thing that you hear time and time again, is that people, once they achieve their goals, they feel emptier than ever. And that's because it's never been about the things. It's always about the feeling. It's always about what those things represent. And so when I started doing this work, I was really lost initially about what I wanted. But I realized it wasn't about the what, it was about the feeling. And so I started to tune in and really it was hard at first, but I just continued to drop in. And one day this vision came to me of me on stage. And immediately I just completely shut it down. I was like, me on a stage. Like that was the last thing I would have ever considered for myself. I consider myself a pretty shy person. I didn't like to speak in front of people, and it was something I never would have considered for myself. And I mentioned this to a partner I had in the group, and because this vision actually kept coming up for me. And so I just allowed it to be. I didn't push it away. I didn't know what it meant, but I just allowed it to be. And I mentioned it to a partner in my group, and she said, "Oh, I could see you leading a retreat one day." And I thought, me? Are you sure you're talking to the right person? And so I just allowed that vision to be there. And over time, I realized I want to share what I have learned. I want to help other women that are going through what I have been going through. I realized I wanted to coach. And I didn't know what that meant at the time. And it was the scariest thing ever to even utter the words that I wanted something. It was so much easier to stay small, to not do anything different, to stay comfortable. But what I knew was that that wasn't creating the feeling that I was chasing. That for me, I needed to be showing up differently in order to connect to the feeling. And so I kept connecting, and I started to tell people I wanted to coach, and I took coaching classes, and I went back and got my Kundalini yoga certification, my regular yoga certification, and I started working with clients. And I created a website, and I created an Instagram handle. And, again, as I was doing this, I said, I will never speak online. There were a lot of things I would never do. But then I would drop in and say, what would the version of myself that has the thing that I want, that is, what would the coach version of me do? And the coach version of me was confident and was showing up in the spaces where she needed to show up to get the message out, because it was never about me. It was always about the message. And so I kept connecting to that, and over time I grew. And now I'm here connecting with you. And it is because I was always connecting to this version of myself that I wasn't not that long ago. And so this is the power of becoming her. This is the power of future self-work. Change happens when you connect to something that is evolved from where you are now. And again, it is always about the feeling, always. And as we are doing this work, a really key part of it is that we need to make sure that we are connecting to that version of ourselves, but that we are not so laser focused on one specific outcome. Because again, it's not about the thing. It was not about me being on stage. Who knows, maybe one day I will be on stage. It's never about the one thing. It may look a little different. And the more that we can expand our view and we are allowing for miracles and for the synchronicities and for the opportunities to come our way. I like to think of it as like a compass. That the work is kind of helping you to find your compass so that you can start taking steps in the direction of where you want to go. And that part of this is the journey about seeing where you end up. And that the compass can recalibrate over time. So I still am connecting to this future self work. I'm still doing it. And that's part of the evolution. And that's a beautiful part of this work, because it's never been about the destination, but the journey is life-changing. It has changed absolutely everything in my life. I am a completely different version of myself than I was just a few years ago. And it's because I allowed myself to connect to something that was a few steps ahead of where I am now. And so I'd love for you to take a moment, and you can shut down the eyes if you'd like, and just really take a moment and think about, what is it that you really want? What is it that your heart desires? And it's okay if nothing comes to you. Just sit with it. And I want you to think about, what is the version of yourself that you want to become? Who is this version of you that you are becoming? And again, it can be a version of you that has a specific thing. It can be a version of you that has a certain job, a certain relationship. But it can also be a version of you that shows up in a certain way. A version of you that has more patience at bedtime with your toddler. A version of you that shows up more confidently at that job interview. And I want you to start to get detailed, really envisioning this version of you. What does she look like? How does she dress? How does she carry herself? And how does it feel? I want you to really feel it in your body. How does it feel? How does she feel? And I want you to feel it in your body as though you are her now. Noticing any sensations in your body. What is the feeling that this version of you is connecting to? This is what you are connecting to. This is what your work is, to drop into this feeling daily. So you can come back and open the eyes, and I just want you to, if you have something to write this down to a piece of paper, a journal. It's really helpful to just jot down maybe what that feeling is. But that right there is how you are going to create change in your life. That is the work, the connecting to that feeling every single day and allowing it to evolve and allowing it to change. But that will change your life. And there are so many other things. I mean, when I work with my clients, we go so much deeper, and there are, it changes, it feels really good. And then there's limiting beliefs, and then there's somatic work in the body. And it's not linear. It's more like this and kind of like this. And it's not easy all the time, but it is so worth it. And this is where it starts. And so I want you, whatever you take away from this video, take away this one thing. Connecting to that feeling will change your life, but you have to be consistent with it. I'm happy to answer any questions. I love chatting with you. What did you take away from this? What was most helpful? I am hosting a Becoming Her live journey starting May 26th. It is daily audio drops. It is a guided practice that you will connect to every single day. You'll get audio drops. And on the last day, we do a live where there's a Q&A, and then we do a live group practice where we are dropping in. And I am offering this for free because I keep connecting with women that need this and they don't know where to start. And I want as many women as possible to be connecting to what is possible for them, because so much is possible, but you just have to know how to start. And this is the start. This is finding your compass so that then you can start taking steps in the right direction. So I would love to have you. I'm going to drop the link below. And again, any comments or questions, I love hearing from you.